Good morning, everybody. We're live here from the birdhouse. It's Tuesday, November 30th, and today we're talking about a large group of birds that you can find right now in the Rochester area if you go out birding, the water. So right now can be a little tough if you go out on a trail. You might not see a whole bunch of variety of birds depending on where you go. But if you go any place that has a large body of water, you should be rewarded by seeing a whole bunch of different types of ducks and mergansers and loons, and we'll go over what you can expect to see and then some really great places to go to actually see them this time of the year. So we're going to get started. But of course, as always, if you have any sightings that you would like to share, definitely put those in the comments. If you have any questions, throw those in there. We'd love to know what kind of things you are seeing in your yard or when you're going out birding. And if you want to say hi, that's always fun to see who's on. So you can always just say hi as well. So today we are talking about waterfowl. So there's this time of the year, there's still over 100 different species you can see in the area. So there's still a lot going on. And right now, probably the most exciting is going to be the different types of ducks and waterfowl that are out there. So when you're going out, you'll probably see some different behaviors that these ducks have. There's the dabbling behavior, and then there's also the diving behavior. And dabbling ducks are going to be like mallards or Canada goose, that kind of thing, where when they are feeding, they will actually tip over upside down. So all you see are these little duck butts sticking out of the water. Whereas the diving ducks will actually dive underneath the water, swim around under there to get their prey, and then pop back up, sometimes way far away. So when you're going out to look for these ducks, it can be kind of tough with the diving ducks. The dabbling ducks, they just kind of pop over upside down, and then they pop back up so you can easily keep your binoculars or scope on them. The diving ducks can be tricky. They go underwater, and who knows where they'll pop up. Sometimes it's totally in a different place than you would expect. Another thing to keep in mind when you're going out birding looking for waterfowl is sometimes they can be pretty far out. So if you have your binoculars, you can see them usually 8 or 10 times closer, depending on what kind of binoculars you have. But having a scope can really give you the get you in way closer, so you can see some of the things that are pretty far out, because some of these guys do go pretty far out into the middle of the lake or the bay, wherever you might be birding. So keep that in mind as well. So if you've got different types of binoculars, say you've got an 8-power binocular or a 10 power binocular, probably want the 10 power binocular when you're going out looking for ducks, because they tend to be a little bit further away than, say, like a chickadee or a cardinal that you might see while going out birding on a trail somewhere. So, some birds to be on the lookout for when you're going out there. There have been some snow goose reported, not in huge numbers, but you might see them. So, if you're seeing something that's bright white, could be a snow goose. As we get into the winter, and I believe it's in February, we'll have that huge mass of snow goose that come through the area, that come through Montezuma. We're not there yet, but you might absolutely see snow goose when you're going out birding. And snow goose are going to be all white. They've got the black tips on their wings, and they're going to be smaller than, say, your Canada goose. And the color will really tip you off that it is a snow goose. And yeah, here's a video of just showing how many pass through Montezuma later on in the winter months. So that's something for us to look forward to. Canada goose, thought I'd mention that. This is one that we all know and we hear quite often, and we see flying in formation, but Canada goose are here all year round. There are some that migrate a little bit, just like we've talked about some of the other birds like bluebirds and robins, how some of them migrate. Some of them will sit here all year. We do have Canada goose here all year. So some other white birds, we're talking about the snow goose. So this is going to be one of the white colored waterfowl you could see out there right now. Here's a couple others. The mute swan And mute swan can be a polarizing type of bird because they can be quite aggressive. If you are going out kayaking, when it's warmer out, you might get chased by a little mute swan. They are pretty territorial. This time of the year, they're less territorial because they're not defending their nesting sites. But they also are an introduced species, so they're non-native species, and they're in the past, and depending on the year, there are sometimes some efforts to try to control their populations. But the mute swan, they're going to be an all-white bird, very, very large. So the color on their bill there is going to distinguish that you have a mute swan. So look for that orange-colored bill, because there's not going to be another swan species that we have here that will look like that. And now this one, the Tundra Swan, is also in the area right now. So they are down here for the winter time. This is their nice warm area for their habitat here in the winter. And Tundra Swan will have all very black bill, but then there's some kind of yellow on the bill, and it can be hard to see sometimes. So again, this is going to be one of the reasons you might want to use your binoculars that have more magnification, or even a scope, so you can see that yellow that is in between their eye and then the rest of their bill. So Tundra Swan are here for the winter months, and there have been quite a few of them spotted around. And harlequin ducks. So a couple weeks ago, I brought up how there has been harlequin ducks spotted, and people are still seeing the harlequin duck out by the Braddock Bay area. And there's been reports of it kind of sprinkled all around. But keep an eye out. People are still seeing a couple of the harlequin duck if you're looking for something, or for a new species that you might not regularly see. This is the one for you. They are uncommon, but they do sometimes come into the area. That's not totally crazy for them to be here in the wintertime, but they're more of a western species. So for them to be here is pretty special. So you might want to go out and check to see where that harlequin duck is. They've been seen right now around Edgemere Drive. I believe it's called Round Pond. And you can go out and look for them there. The best way to see where these guys have been spotted recently is to go on eBird and to click Explore, type in the species name, and then zoom in towards the lakeshore, and you can see all the little pinpoints where they've been spotted, and you can see that by date. So you can see exactly where people have been seeing it, seeing these guys and any other species that you're looking for. That's the best way to find them if you are looking, especially if you're looking for something very specific. So that is the harlequin duck. So keep your eyes open for them if you're going out birding. The northern shoveler. There are northern shoveler, especially if you're going out towards Montezuma. There's been a lot of them out there. The northern shoveler, they have that really big bill. So their coloring isn't all too different from the mallard. So if you're having difficulty trying to distinguish, is it a mallard or is it a shoveler? Well, first of all, they're going to have that really cinnamon colored patch on the side of their body, at least the males will. But what really differentiates them is that really wide bill. And the females also have that really wide bill too. So the females are going to be more of a nondescript, kind of a brownish color, but they have that really wide bill. So that is the northern shoveler, and they have been seen around as well. And what's nice about when you go out birding looking for these ducks, a lot of the times there'll be just this giant raft of them. So you can see them from afar. And then once you start looking and pinpointing at all the species, sometimes you can get a whole bunch of species that are all grouped together in that big raft. Another species, this is called the Gadwall. And Gadwall are kind of a nondescript, talk about kind of a plain colored plumage, but when they're in flight, you can see they do have really beautiful wings. They've got this cinnamon colored patch on their wing along with some white on it. They're going to be a little bit smaller than, say, a female mallard. They have a really round head. That's one way you can kind of identify them. But there's been a good amount of Gadwall spotted along the lakeshore. And of course, all of these birds you can find in Montezuma if you're looking for a great way to spend a few hours going out to Montezuma to check out these birds. There's a whole bunch of different species out there. Same with the American Wigeon. So the American Wigeon, the males, will have this really nice green stripe on the side of their face. And then they also have quite a lot of white on the top of their head. So the females will as well. They'll have that white on top of their head. So American Wigeon, absolutely been spotted. And then there's our mallard, our common mallard duck that we're all familiar with. But what looks really similar to the mallard, and this can be one of, if you're trying to identify a few different ducks from each other, trying to identify the black duck versus the mallard can be a bit of a challenge. But if you look at the mallard, the black duck looks a lot like the female mallard. The male looks very, very different. The male mallard looks super different from the black duck. But if you're having some difficulty trying to figure out the difference between the mallard and the black duck, there are some ways to tell the difference. The biggest one is going to be the color of the wing. So if you look at the wing of the female mallard, and you can see it here really well in the male, when in flight here, they have white on their wings in two places. So they've got these two white stripes that are pretty bold and bright, and you can usually see them when they're at rest as well. So you can see it here on the female. She's got the white stripe here. She's got the white stripe here. The black duck is not going to have that. So if you see the black duck here, just has that bluish color on its wing, and it's just lined in black. So you can see it really well when they're in flight. But again, at rest, you can usually see it. And they just have an overall kind of darker color. So that can be hard to differentiate unless you see the two next to each other. But if you look at the female mallard here, she's kind of more of a light tan color, and the black duck is going to be more brown. So some ways to tell the difference between them. Pintail, there's been a ton of pintail, especially around Montezuma, but they've been spotted around our lake shore here in Rochester. And the pintail get their name because the males have that really striking tail that just pops up and is nice and thin. And so lots of pintail have been seen in the area, especially around Montezuma. So keep an eye out for them as well. Green-winged teal, you might see one or two of them sprinkled in here and there. This is a small little duck, and they get their name because they do have that green patch on their wing. Really obvious in the males. Not only do they have that green patch on their wing, they also have green on their face, and they've got that cinnamon colored head. But the females also have that little green patch there on their wing, especially in the spring and in the summer. We'll have another type of teal called the blue-winged teal. They're not really going to be here around this time of the year. You might see one, but it would be pretty rare to see one right now. You're more likely to see this green-winged teal. And then when we're talking about dabbling ducks and diving ducks, all of the ducks I have mentioned earlier are all the dabbling ducks. So they're all the ones that will stick their butts up in the air when they're feeding. These are all the diving ducks. So this is what's happening when you see that duck diving underwater. This is how some of them can swim really, really well. We're so used to seeing them above water, you don't really see what's going on below. But these are our diving ducks now that you might see when you're going out birding. The redhead gets its name because it has a very, very red colored head, and it's also going to have kind of a gray or bluish colored bill that's tipped in black. There's another bird that looks pretty similar called the canvasback. Not as common this time of the year, so you're most likely to see the redhead between the two. Redhead is going to be the one that's more common that you'll see. So this is the redhead, and there's also ringneck duck out there. Ringneck duck. The name kind of throws me because I don't see that bit like a really bold ring around their neck, but they do have this stripe between their bill and their face here. So they do have this white line, and in the juveniles and the females, they've got one as well. But ringneck duck people are absolutely seeing out there. And a bird that I think looks quite similar to the ringneck duck, so here's your ringneck duck, is going to be the scaups. So there's what's called the greater and the lesser scaup. And the differences between the two are going to be the ringneck duck, of course, has that stripe by its face here. And then they're also more of a grayish color on their body, whereas the scaups are going to have that really white, bright white patch on their body. So if you're looking at these two ducks, you might go, well, what's the difference between the two? It can be difficult to tell. And the main difference is going to be the shape of the head. So the lesser scaup has this more thin head, and the greater scaup has a really rounded head. So again, this is going to be one that it can be hard to tell the difference unless you see the two next to each other. But the lesser scaup has that thin, the thin head, and then the greater scaup has more of a rounded head. The coloration, although it looks different in these pictures, the coloration is quite similar between the two. So the color isn't really the best way to tell the difference. Going to be the shape of their head is the best way to tell the difference between the two. And then scoters, if you're out on the water, look for these guys. They've got these crazy looking bills. So it almost looks like they've got something growing on their bill. It's a very large bill. It's kind of like a chunky type of bill. And both of these are out and about. You're probably most likely to see this white-winged scoter here, which is on the bottom. But there's also black scoter. We do have something called surf scoter here too. White-winged scoter is really going to be the one you're most likely to see. And it gets its name because it has the white patch on its wing. And then, of course, the long-tailed duck, possibly our most beautiful duck that we have here, and they are only here in the winter. So this is a really great species to go out and see, and they will form huge rafts here, especially if you go out along the Charlotte Pier and that kind of thing. You can sometimes see hundreds and hundreds of long-tailed duck out there, and they're really a sight to see. So I'd highly recommend you going out to see those long-tailed ducks. And Bufflehead, people are reporting Bufflehead. This is another duck that's pretty small, so it's going to be smaller than your mallard. And the males will have that bright white patch on the back of their head, but even the females have a little white patch there too. So be on the lookout for the Bufflehead. And the common Goldeneye, this is a bird that we have here in the wintertime, so you're really not going to see them here in the spring and in the summer. But the Goldeneye, like their name suggests, they do have the bright yellow eye, just like the scaups do. But then they will also have way more white on their body, at least the males do. And they've got that white patch by their in between their bill and their face. So common Goldeneye are absolutely in the area right now, as are the hooded Merganser, which is another small little duck. And when flared out, there's really nothing that looks the same as the hooded Merganser. When they have their feathers flared, looks quite different from any other kind of duck species you'll see here in the area. So if you see something with kind of this crazy feather, these crazy feathers flared out, that's going to be your hooded Merganser. And there are other species of Merganser, the common Merganser here, the male and female, another really common species you can find. And also the red-breasted Merganser, which will have that red colored eye, which the common Merganser does not have. So be on the lookout for both of these. And then the pied-billed grebe, not in huge quantities, but there are some being seen. I've got another little guy, little small waterfowl, and they have a little head, very little bill, and they've got this black stripe that goes through their bill as well. So that's an identifying characteristic there. So the little pied-billed grebe you might just see as well. A couple more. The common loon. The common loon is another bird that most people are familiar with. So you might see them out, especially a little bit further out if you've got a scope. Sometimes they tend to be out further than some of these other ducks are, so you might not see them unless you do have something with more magnification. But we've got our common loon, and then the red-throated loon, which is a little deceiving this time of the year because they don't have their red throat right now. And then, of course, the cormorant. So not your typical waterfowl species, but this is a bird that hangs out by the water, and they tend to be more common in the spring and summer, but we do have them here in the winter. So this is the double-crested cormorant. and they've got that yellow bill with the little hook on it, and they're often seen diving under the water to get fish. And not waterfowl at all, but some other birds to be on the lookout for when you're going out by the water are, of course, going to be the bald eagle. So bald eagles like the same kind of habitat as the waterfowl do. They eat a lot of fish, so any kind of open water is perfect hunting grounds for the bald eagle. They are really great predators, so sometimes they will go after waterfowl, but they're most likely after fish, and some of them are pairing up now as well, so you might see them flying together. You might see a pair sitting next to each other on a tree like this, so be on the lookout for them. And then, of course, the snowy owl too. If you're going out by the water, you might just catch a snowy owl either sitting on a pier or sitting at if you're someplace that has a lighthouse, or even trees around the water. Be on the lookout for the snowy owl because people are starting to see them as well in the area. So a little review of the different types of ducks that you can see. And here are some good places to go to actually see them. Of course, Montezuma. Everybody knows Montezuma. You can drive through the wildlife drive and see a lot of these species. Even if you just stop at their nature center, at the little visitors center there, it's nice and flooded and you can see a lot of ducks there. But doing the wildlife drive, simple way to see some of these ducks. Of course, around Aquoit Bay, Lake Ontario, Braddock Bay. These are specific pinpoints here taken from the Rochester Birding Association page, which I highly recommend if you're looking for some hot spots to go birding. Check that out, their site. It's rochesterbirding.org. And Ontario Beach State Park is a place to go to look for some of these guys. They've been seeing some interesting things. I believe that might have been where the harlequin duck was first spotted. So they tend to see some neat things flying through that area. So Ontario Beach State Park is great. Any place around Braddock Bay, there's so many little inlets and that kind of thing. So Braddock Bay, that whole complex is fantastic to do birding, to go birding this time of the year. So Braddock Bay, fantastic. And LaSalle's Park, if you are out driving and you've got a little bit of spare time, this is a small little place that is right off of Empire Boulevard. You can pull right in. You can have your binoculars out, and sometimes even just from the seat of your car, you can see some of these birds. So that's LaSalle's Landing, right on 404 or Empire Boulevard. Really easy, accessible place to see some of these guys. And around Aquoit Bay, any place around the bay, it's fantastic. Even just driving along the bay, driving along Lake Road, you might find a little pull off to check out some of these bodies of water where you can find some of these birds. And then out by Seabreeze, if you find yourself out that way off of 590 where the Bill Grays is out there, if you're familiar with the area right by Seabreeze Park, there's a little boat launch. You can pull in there. And that's another place you can do birding right from your car. And you can find some of these ducks. You can find lots of gulls there. So another easy, accessible place to bird in the wintertime. So those are the ducks that you can find in the area right now, the ducks in our area. Of course, there could be some other ones. We'll let you know if there's any other rarities that come through in the area. If you've got questions, absolutely can put them in the comments here. Dina says, good morning, everyone. The great horned owl was hooting again last night in the backyard. No sightings yet. Ooh, that's exciting. That's exciting to hear that they're still hooting. We're actually leading an owl prowl, a private owl prowl, tomorrow for the store. So I'm hoping we hear some kind of owls hooting while we're doing that. Cassie says, thanks for putting all the ducks in a row. You're welcome. You are welcome, Cassie. And Irma says, Montezuma's Wildlife Drive closes 12/1. Thank you, Irma, for letting us know that. So if you are looking to do some birding out on Wildlife Drive, you've got to get there quick because it does close. I didn't realize it closed that soon in the season, but it makes sense. It gets a little treacherous to drive there once we get into the winter months. So that looks like everybody's comments and questions. We'll be back on Saturday with another broadcast about some more in general winter birds that you can find. So not just ducks, but we'll talk about the different owls, the different songbirds. So some different birds you can find in the area in the wintertime. We also in store have an event on Saturday morning. We've got Don Eilhart here, our local news celebrity. He wrote a children's book called Sibley's Christmas Adventure. He'll be doing a meet and greet and book signing here at the Birdhouse from 10 to 1 on Saturday. So if you're looking for a holiday gift for the child in your life, he will be here if you want to check out that book, or if you just want to stop and say hi. He'll be here from 10 until 1 on Saturday, and that's December 4th. So we look forward to seeing you either online or in person on Saturday. And until then, have a